Savannah, Georgia, 2023. Emily Rogers lived in a pale blue house with white shutters and soft hydrangeas blooming under every window. The porch swing creaked gently in the morning breeze, and the scent of pine wafted in from the nearby park. Emily had grown used to this rhythm, quiet, predictable, and steeped in old Southern charm. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved from their porches and nothing ever seemed urgent. At 32, Emily worked as a librarian in the city's historic public library, a red brick building lined with wrought iron balconies and creaky wooden floors. The scent of old pages comforted her more than most human contact. She was known among patrons for her precision, her quiet patience, and her habit of organizing everything in perfect alphabetical order, including her life. Her husband Daniel was the opposite in every way. A high school athletics coach, he was spontaneous, loud, and effortlessly warm. He laughed easily, cheered too loud at football games, and always hugged people a moment too long. Their connection wasn't built on fiery passion, but on a shared respect for space and silence. At least that was what Emily told herself on sleepless nights. They had their routines. Breakfast together every Sunday morning, always scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. Evening walks after work, even in the heat. Movie marathons in winter with hot cocoa and mismatched blankets. Emily loved those details, not for what they were, but for what they promised: stability, safety, continuity. But things had shifted since Marilyn arrived. Emily's mother had moved in from Charleston after her third divorce, carrying with her a cloud of perfume, expensive scarves, and a constant stream of unsolicited advice. What was meant to be temporary had turned permanent within weeks. Marilyn claimed she needed time to recover and a place to feel needed. Emily felt obligated to say yes. At first, Marilyn had slept in the guest room. She helped with laundry, cooked on weekends, and reorganized Emily's kitchen without asking. Daniel had welcomed her, saying it was nice to have energy in the house. Emily forced herself to ignore the way he smiled more when Marilyn laughed. She told herself she was imagining things. Still, the tension built in small moments. Marilyn wore perfume that lingered on Daniel's shirt. She touched his arm too often at dinner. She commented on how fit he looked for his age. Daniel laughed these things off, brushing them aside like crumbs on the table. Emily tried to do the same, but couldn't shake the chill behind her ribs. She told herself it was just jealousy, resentment for how easily her mother charmed everyone. Marilyn had always been magnetic: parties, men, conversations. Emily, by contrast, had learned to fade into the background. She was the good daughter, the quiet one, the one who never made trouble. But something about this arrangement didn't sit right. Emily began noticing small absences. Daniel started coming home later from school. He said there were extra practices or meetings. Marilyn stayed up later, sitting in the kitchen with her wine and that low, humming music she loved from the 60s. Sometimes when Emily got up in the night, she thought she heard whispers. She started doubting herself. She had always trusted Daniel. She had always tried to trust her mother. Yet now, trust felt like a thin veil she had to constantly hold up. Every smile between them felt too long, every glance too weighty. She checked Daniel's phone once but found nothing. That didn't reassure her. It made her feel worse. One Saturday afternoon, she came home early from the farmer's market and found Marilyn in the kitchen, her blouse slightly unbuttoned, her hair tousled like she had just woken from a nap. Daniel was pouring wine. They both looked surprised to see Emily, even though it was her house. Nothing was said, but something passed between them in that silence. A signal, a flicker. That night, as Emily lay beside her husband, listening to the rhythm of his breath, she realized she had no idea who either of them really were. The house that once brought her comfort now felt like a stage set, every room scripted, every smile rehearsed. Savannah wasn't her home anymore. It was a cage dressed in magnolia-scented nostalgia. And deep inside, Emily knew something had started, something that couldn't be undone. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Daniel, once always home by 6, started arriving later and later. He blamed it on new practice schedules, on unexpected meetings, on traffic that suddenly worsened without reason. Emily accepted the explanations at first, but the pattern solidified. Monday, Thursday, even Sunday nights. He no longer rushed to get home. He lingered elsewhere. Meanwhile, Marilyn became a fixture in their house. What had started as an occasional overnight visit evolved into something routine. She stayed over at least 3 nights a week now, citing loneliness or poor sleep in her apartment. Emily couldn't protest without sounding cruel. She told herself it was temporary. It wasn't. Marilyn and Daniel developed a rhythm of their own. They joked in ways that excluded Emily, shared glances that seemed private, and called each other by nicknames Emily never used. Marilyn started calling him Dan. That name made Emily's stomach turn, but neither of them noticed, or cared. It became a background hum she couldn't silence. Emily watched how her mother leaned into conversations with Daniel, how her hand sometimes touched his shoulder when she laughed, how Daniel responded with that smile Emily had once thought was only hers. The distance between husband and wife wasn't measured in arguments, but in absence, in what wasn't said, in what no longer needed to be. One afternoon, Emily returned home earlier than expected. Her shift at the library had been cut short due to a power outage. She stepped inside quietly, not wanting to disturb. From the hallway, she saw Marilyn exit the kitchen in a hurry, fixing her hair, her cheeks flushed. Daniel stood behind her, looking down, his jaw tight. Neither of them spoke when they saw her. Emily felt the weight of their silence like a stone. Her heart thudded, but she said nothing. She walked past them, straight to the bedroom, pretending not to notice anything out of place. But inside her, something shifted. A brittle crack she couldn't glue back together. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake while Daniel snored softly beside her, his hand curled into a fist. Her mind reeled with questions she couldn't ask. Instead, she got up, went to the living room, and took his phone from the coffee table. Her hands trembled. She unlocked it with a code she had known for years. There was nothing. No strange texts, no photos, no calls to unknown numbers. Even the browser history was clean. Too clean. Emily scrolled for an hour, but found only silence. It was a silence that screamed. That left her colder than any confirmation ever could. It meant he was hiding something well. The next day, she checked the shared desktop in the study. Daniel often forgot to log out. She opened his email and scanned through the inbox. Most messages were mundane: school updates, sports schedules, gym newsletters. But one email stood out: a hotel reservation, February 14th, made under Marilyn's name, paid by Daniel's credit card. Her breath caught in her throat. Valentine's Day. A boutique hotel just across town. She clicked on the confirmation. One night. King suite, champagne included. The message was short, impersonal, but final. There was no way to misread it, no way to twist it into something innocent. It was a fact. Emily closed the laptop and sat back in the chair, staring at the dusty window. Outside, the wind moved the branches of the old oak tree, casting long shadows across the living room floor. The house had always felt like shelter. Now it felt like a stage, and she was the only one who hadn't read the script. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. The pain was slow, like a dull needle pressing into the same spot again and again. She realized she wasn't shocked, not truly. Somewhere deep down, she had known. Her body had known. Her silence had been a form of waiting for proof. Later that night, Daniel came home smelling like cologne that wasn't his. He kissed her on the forehead like always, made dinner, and asked about her day. Emily answered with practiced calm. She didn't mention the email. She didn't accuse. Not yet. She wasn't ready to scream. She was ready to watch. In bed, he fell asleep easily. Emily stayed awake, eyes wide in the dark, replaying everything. The looks, the laughter, the hotel. She knew something else now, something far worse than betrayal. She knew she was alone. Not physically, but existentially, emotionally orphaned in her own marriage. She imagined them, Marilyn and Daniel, laughing over wine, toasting to secrecy. She imagined the bed, the hotel room, the heat of it, the casual way he would touch her mother's back, the intimacy built on her blindness. Emily didn't cry. She simply lay still, and for the first time began planning. Emily didn't scream. She didn't confront them or storm out. Instead, she sat with the silence and let it sharpen her resolve. Her pain didn't flare, it calcified. She moved through the house like a shadow, unnoticed, underestimated. They both thought of her as fragile, incapable of boldness. She let them think that. It would make what came next even more powerful. The opportunity came wrapped in tradition. Daniel's parents were preparing to celebrate their 40th wedding anniversary. A large gathering was planned, with extended family flying in, speeches, old photo reels, and toasts expected. Emily volunteered to organize the entire evening. Her voice was steady. Her offer surprised everyone. Daniel was relieved. Marilyn looked skeptical, but didn't protest. They assumed Emily was trying to restore normalcy, to pretend everything was fine. She encouraged that illusion. She asked about catering, arranged seating charts, created digital invitations. She smiled often and never once raised her voice. It was her most convincing performance. She booked a rustic event space overlooking the Savannah River. The venue had high ceilings, exposed brick, and chandeliers strung with soft amber light. Emily told everyone she wanted to create something timeless, intimate. She spent hours perfecting the atmosphere. Curated playlists, hand-picked table decor, and floral arrangements matching the family's heritage colors. She commissioned a large banner to hang behind the stage. It was to be a centerpiece, a collage of photos from across the decades, weddings, birthdays, childhoods. She sent the printing company a zip file marked Family Memories. But inside, buried under a layer of normal images, she embedded another set of files, a secret gallery. Weeks before the party, Emily had installed a discreet camera in the living room. It looked like a small air purifier, something no one would question. It captured exactly what she expected. Marilyn and Daniel on the couch, her mother's hand resting on his thigh. A slow lean, a kiss. Not one moment of hesitation between them. She downloaded the footage, extracted stills, and edited the images into black and white snapshots. She didn't add captions. She didn't need to. The pictures spoke louder than any words ever could. She placed those images at the end of the banner file, in sequence. They'd be printed along with all the others, indistinguishable until revealed. She hired a videographer under the pretense of creating a family documentary. She told him she wanted candids, unscripted reactions, honest expressions. She gave him a shot list, including the moment when the banner would be unveiled. She didn't say why that moment mattered. She wanted it caught on camera without interference. In the days leading up to the party, Emily rehearsed nothing. She avoided thinking about the fallout. She focused only on execution. She confirmed the lighting schedule. She ensured the screen would drop exactly at the midpoint of the evening. She arranged the music to swell as the images appeared. It would seem spontaneous. At home, Marilyn grew more comfortable. She wore Daniel's shirts in the morning. She made breakfast before Emily woke. Daniel, meanwhile, smiled more. He thought Emily's silence meant surrender. He saw her calm as resignation. They laughed at the table, sometimes without noticing she was still in the room. Emily watched and waited. She printed escort cards for every guest. She double-checked the RSVPs. She asked Daniel's mother for family photos, feigning warmth. Everyone praised her dedication. Relatives called her gracious, so thoughtful, a true part of the family. Emily nodded, thanked them softly, and returned to her checklist. Every detail was a step toward truth. The night before the event, she walked through the venue alone. The tables were set. The banner, still rolled, leaned against the wall. The AV team had tested the screen and sound system. Everything was ready. Emily stood in the center of the room, eyes closed, visualizing it all. Her heartbeat stayed calm. She wasn't afraid. This wasn't revenge, she told herself. It was a mirror, a quiet invitation to see things as they truly were. Not in anger, but in clarity. No confrontation, no raised voice, just truth, delivered without apology. After that, people could choose what to believe, but they wouldn't be able to unsee what she'd shown them. Back at home, Daniel kissed her cheek and told her how proud he was. Marilyn asked about the dessert menu and poured herself a glass of wine. Emily nodded, answered calmly, and went to bed early. Her body lay still under the covers, but her mind rehearsed the reveal like choreography. The banner, the silence, the rupture. Morning arrived without ceremony. Emily dressed slowly, choosing a pale green dress with pearl buttons. She pinned her hair back neatly. She applied minimal makeup, nothing theatrical. She looked like someone ready to celebrate family. In truth, she was ready to destroy the illusion of one, but only with their own actions. She drove to the venue alone, windows down, air warm against her face. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel numb. She felt clear, present, and beneath the surface of her stillness, a quiet storm waited. Tidal, patient, and irreversible. The evening unfolded like a painting. Strings of soft light stretched across the ceiling beams. The floral centerpieces bloomed in precise symmetry. Classical music floated through the air as guests arrived in waves, exchanging hugs, handshakes, and stories. Emily greeted them all with the calm grace of a practiced host. She wore a navy blue dress that fell neatly to her knees. Her hair was pulled into a low twist, and a single pearl necklace sat at her collar. She moved from table to table, smiling gently, ensuring everything ran on time. No one noticed the tension behind her composed expression. Daniel stayed close to Marilyn for most of the evening. He poured her wine, touched her elbow when he passed, and laughed too loudly at her anecdotes. Emily watched from a distance, never interrupting. It wasn't time. Let them enjoy their moment, she thought. Let them feel safe in their lie. Family albums were placed on a memory table near the entrance. Guests flipped through them with warm nostalgia. Pictures from childhood summers, faded wedding photos, and black and white portraits of grandparents stirred soft laughter and murmurs. No one suspected that something beneath the surface was about to rupture. A catered buffet lined the back wall, offering Southern classics, shrimp and grits, cornbread, pecan pies. Wine flowed freely. Conversations grew louder. The room filled with the kind of laughter that only came from shared history. The illusion of harmony thickened. It was almost convincing. Daniel's father gave a short speech about love, legacy, and sticking together through storms. Everyone clapped. Glasses clinked. Marilyn wiped a tear from her eye. She reached for Daniel's hand and squeezed it. Emily stood nearby, silent, still, her hands folded politely in front of her waist. When it was time for the family video, the lights dimmed. A hush settled across the crowd. The projector hummed to life, casting warm light against the large screen near the stage. Emily walked to the laptop and clicked play. Then she stepped back and watched the room instead of the images. The slideshow began with gentle piano music, childhood birthdays, a wedding kiss, the birth of Daniel's nephew. The crowd smiled, some whispering memories aloud. The photographs slowed, shifting toward more recent years. Anniversaries, vacations, backyard cookouts, familiar comforting snapshots of a well-lived family life. Then, the screen flickered once. A brief pause. The music faded. And the next frame appeared, no longer from a camera roll, but from security footage, the living room couch. Marilyn seated closely beside Daniel, his hand resting on her knee, her fingers stroking his wrist. They were laughing, alone. No sound accompanied the footage. Just images, one after another. Marilyn leaning in, Daniel not pulling away, her lips against his, a hand slipping under his shirt. The sequence slowed as if time itself had thickened. Gasps rippled through the room like a dropped glass shattering on tile. Someone choked on a breath. A woman near the front turned and walked quickly toward the exit. A chair scraped against the floor. Daniel's mother stood frozen, mouth slightly open. His father clenched the edge of the table. Silence fell, dense and suffocating. The footage continued, frame after damning frame. In the center of it all stood Marilyn. Her expression had collapsed into something unrecognizable. Shock drained the color from her cheeks. Her posture stiffened, hands shaking. She glanced at Daniel, who looked equally paralyzed. He opened his mouth, but no words came. They were exposed, undressed by evidence. Emily did not flinch. She stood at the edge of the room, arms at her sides, breathing evenly. Her heart was not racing. Her lips were not trembling. She watched the room as a director watches the final scene of a long-awaited play. Everything unfolded exactly as she had envisioned. No one approached her. No one needed to. The message was clear. The betrayal had been delivered not as accusation, but as observation. Truth, unspoken yet undeniable, now belonged to everyone in the room. The performance was complete. The set was dismantled. Only the raw aftermath remained. The screen went black. The lights returned. But no one spoke. Emily stepped forward, picked up the laptop, and left the stage without acknowledging anyone. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply exited the scene, graceful, composed, whole. She had already mourned what was lost. Behind her, chaos grew in whispers. Marilyn sat motionless, staring down at her hands. Daniel walked out a side door, his face ghost white. Guests shifted awkwardly, some leaving, others lingering in stunned disbelief. The party was over, though no one dared to say it out loud. Emily returned to her car, the quiet of the evening folding around her like fabric. The river reflected the soft lights of the venue, and the sound of crickets filled the air. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The truth had spoken, and there was no way to rewind it. In the days following the party, silence settled over Emily's world like a heavy snowfall. It muffled every sound, absorbed every breath. No one knocked on her door. No one rang the bell. The house, once filled with forced laughter and clinking glasses, now echoed with a quiet that felt final. Marilyn left the very next morning. She didn't say goodbye. She packed her bags quickly, avoiding eye contact, and called for a cab. Emily watched from the window as her mother rolled 2 suitcases to the curb. The taxi drove away without hesitation. Marilyn didn't look back. Daniel stayed 2 more days. He tried to talk. He sat at the edge of the bed, hands clasped, eyes pleading. He left notes around the house, texted long messages at midnight, sent voicemails filled with apologies. Emily read none of them. She didn't need more words. She had seen the truth. On the 3rd day, Daniel packed his belongings. He moved slowly, waiting for Emily to stop him. She didn't. She sat on the couch, sipping cold tea, watching the shadows shift across the floor. When the front door closed behind him, she exhaled for the first time in hours. It felt clean. The city responded in waves. Neighbors whispered. Some avoided her. Others brought flowers. A few praised her bravery. One woman at the grocery store murmured, "How could you do that to your own mother?" as she passed. Emily said nothing. She understood their confusion. People hated when masks were removed. She contacted a lawyer the following Monday. The office was quiet, filled with polished wood and soft lighting. The attorney, a woman in her 40s with a precise voice, listened carefully. Emily explained everything. She wanted a divorce. She wanted her property protected. And she wanted her mother legally barred from access. The paperwork began immediately. Emily signed documents with steady hands. She answered every question clearly. There was no bitterness in her tone, just resolve. The process was procedural, clinical. She didn't grieve the marriage or the blood tie. What was gone had been gone long before the party. At home, she gathered everything that no longer belonged. Daniel's hoodies, Marilyn's scarves, holiday decorations bought as a trio. She folded each item neatly, labeled boxes with black marker, and scheduled a courier. Even the photo albums were packed away. Decades of birthdays, holidays, posed smiles. She felt no sentiment. One box she kept unopened. It contained letters, cards, and trinkets she hadn't touched in years. She placed it in the attic, out of sight. She didn't need to destroy the past. She simply refused to let it occupy space anymore. There was no room left for what had already expired. She cleaned the guest room last, stripped the sheets, aired the pillows, opened the windows wide. The room smelled of lemon and dust. She stood there for a long time, eyes on the bare mattress, then turned off the light and closed the door. The space would remain empty. Daniel continued to reach out. Voicemails, emails, handwritten letters slipped into her mailbox. He asked for forgiveness, for a second chance, for a conversation. Emily deleted each message without listening. She didn't need his regret. He wasn't sorry before the truth was public, only now, when there was no hiding. As the weeks passed, the attention faded. Neighbors returned to their routines. Gossip lost momentum. The world moved on, as it always did. Emily found comfort in that quiet forgetting. Not everyone needed to remember. Not everyone deserved to know. Her story belonged to her again. She redecorated the living room. New cushions, a second-hand armchair. She donated the old curtains, changed the locks, and planted rosemary by the front steps. It wasn't about starting over. It was about claiming what remained. The house felt lighter now, the silence less cruel. She felt something like peace. One afternoon, she found an old necklace of her mother's in a drawer, gold with a small opal pendant. Emily held it in her palm for a minute, then placed it in the last box to be returned. She taped it shut, wrote "Final" across the lid, and set it by the door. It was over. Her heart no longer ached. The pain had come and gone like a storm, loud, wild, and complete. It had hollowed her out and made space. When she looked in the mirror now, she didn't see the woman who had been betrayed. She saw someone emptied of illusions, someone free. What came before, every breakfast, every quiet lie, every small betrayal, felt like a life belonging to someone else. A blurry version of herself she no longer recognized. The moment she saw their faces on the screen, everything that mattered had already ended. The rest was just cleanup. 1 year later, Emily lived in Asheville, North Carolina. The town was quiet, nestled among blue hills and misty mornings. Her apartment sat on the edge of a wooded slope where tall trees leaned toward her windows like old friends. No neighbors, no footsteps above or below, only wind and birds. She had taken a job at a small contemporary art gallery downtown. The pace was slow, the hours gentle. She curated rotating exhibits, arranged lighting, and wrote essays for the quarterly catalog. The silence of the space reminded her of the library, but it didn't echo with memories. Her apartment was smaller than the house in Savannah, but it suited her. Everything inside had been chosen with care. A modest oak desk, linen curtains, a second-hand record player that crackled softly in the evenings. There were no family portraits on the walls, only landscapes and abstract paintings. Emily bought a bicycle, dark green with a wicker basket. On weekends, she rode through winding streets, stopping at bookstores and cafes. She carried a leather notebook wherever she went. Inside it, she wrote about betrayal, silence, reinvention. She didn't try to make sense of it all. She wrote to release it. She adopted a gray tabby cat from a local shelter. The cat followed her from room to room, slept beside her legs, and purred when Emily read aloud. She named it Finch, after a character from a book she once loved. The presence of another living thing brought her unexpected comfort. Letters came every few months. Most were from Marilyn, some from Daniel. She never opened them. She kept them stacked neatly in the bottom drawer of her desk, tied together with a red ribbon. They sat there like artifacts from a past life, untouched, unread, unnecessary. She no longer felt the urge to explain herself. She stopped checking social media, changed her number, and told only 2 people where she had moved. She no longer needed to be seen. She needed only to exist on her own terms, in her own space, without eyes tracking her steps. Autumn came early in Asheville. The trees turned amber and crimson. Emily found herself pausing more often during walks, watching leaves drift to the ground. Each season now felt earned, each quiet morning a small victory. The ache in her chest had long since faded into stillness. Then one evening, as rain tapped gently on the window, she opened the drawer. She untied the ribbon and sifted through the envelopes until she found one that felt different. She didn't know why she chose that one. Perhaps it was the weight of the paper, or maybe just instinct. She opened it slowly. The handwriting was Daniel's. There was no date, no greeting, just one line. "I was weak, but I never wanted to lose you." She stared at it for several minutes, her thumb pressed into the corner. No anger rose, only clarity, the kind that didn't shake, only settled. She crumpled the page without ceremony, walked to the fireplace, struck a match. The paper curled black in the flames and vanished. She watched until only ash remained. There was no satisfaction, no revenge, just release. Some things deserved to disappear without a trace. Afterward, she sat at her desk, opened her notebook, and wrote a single sentence. "Strength is not the absence of pain. It is the choice to rise through it." She closed the cover, exhaled slowly, and leaned back. Her story wasn't over, but the past had lost its voice. At night, when the house grew quiet, Emily sometimes stood by the window, looking into the dark forest. The old fears didn't return. They had nowhere left to hide. She had built her own home, not with bricks or memories, but with solitude and truth, a house no one else could enter. She didn't need forgiveness, not from them, not from herself. She had survived what was meant to undo her. That was enough. Every breath, every morning, every new page was proof, not of healing, but of resilience. And in that quiet, she lived, not loudly, not perfectly, but freely.